Hello, 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 all. I look very red. It's fine. Welcome to the Inkwell Exchange. Let me invite our guest really quick. First and foremost. There. Let's get her up and on. Stay with us for just a second. And there we go. Hello. Welcome to the Inkwell Exchange. I am so excited that everyone has come to see us, whether live or looking at the recording. I'm so excited for today's guest, but I'm going to give everyone the little spiel, the little intro before we start. Welcome to the Inkwell Exchange. It's a platform I'm building where creators, creatives of all types, writers, poets, published and unpublished, creators who are adjacent and deal with in words, right? So our audiobook narrator is a good example of what we've got today. I am so excited to introduce you to our guest. I'm going to let her introduce herself, I'm going to hand it over to her right now. But I'm so thankful that you all joined. Please give a hearty welcome to our guest. Please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. So lovely to be here. I am Lillian Rachel. I'm an audiobook narrator. I'm British, as you can tell, but I am living here in sunny California, although today it's kind of rainy. And this is what I love to do, bring your books to audio. This is my passion.
I love that, Lillian. And I looked through so much of your work, and so I've seen a little bit of your accolades, but I'd love for you to tell us, let's start off with, like, how did you get into audiobook narration? I don't think that's on the, like, doctor, lawyer list they give us in kindergarten.
It's not. It's one of those things that you do because you find it and you just love it. It's, I don't know anybody that does it because, you know, it was their ideal growing up. I don't know. My daughter, my eldest daughter, had a couple of stories published in an anthology, and that went to audio. And it was just about that time in my life, and I was thinking, what do I want to do? Not just for a job, you know, but what do I actually want to do with my life? What do I want to be when I grow up? Even though I was in my 40s, I was like, what do I want to do? What really, no, really, child, what do you want to do? And her book went into audio, and she sent me a link, and it was like one of those light bulb moments when you're like, wait a second, this is actually something that I could do. You know, I learned that most audiobook narrators work from home. You can go out to recording studios and work with the publishers, but the majority of work is done through home studios, especially now since 2020, but this was even before the pandemic. And it was just one of those light bulb moments. I went to my husband and I said, I think I know what I want to do. I want to be an audiobook narrator. And he just turned to me and said, oh yeah, of course. It was just like, it was a no-brainer, and we had no idea what we were getting into, but that launched the whole learning curve and the whole process.
That is so lovely. So why don't you tell us a little bit about one of your maybe latest projects, or even like a favorite project that you feel was like a tipping point where you're like, oh no, I'm actually really great at this.
I don't know if I've ever thought that.
Well, I do. You're really great.
No, I really love doing it. And there's certainly projects where I'm like, oh, this is like amazing. I'm like, you get in the zone and you find that there's that meld between the writing and you kind of thing, and you really feel like you match with it. And I've been fortunate that I've loved every book that I've done, or at least liked every book that I've done. You know, you find that connection. There's always some kind of a connection that you can connect with. Yeah, I don't know if I can pick a favorite one. I don't know. You know, you were talking about the accolades, and I recently won an award for a nonfiction book, and that was amazing because it was a difficult project to narrate, just because the content was difficult and it was long. But again, I step out of the booth and I have to decompress, and then you go back in and you're like in the zone again. And so that was a nonfiction book called In the Name of God, about religious tolerance and intolerance throughout history. And I love history, so anything with a historical bent, fiction or nonfiction, I really enjoy delving into. So that was a moment where I was like, hey, I really think maybe I can make a go of this. Maybe I'm on the right track. Yeah.
I love that. So how do you pick your projects? What are, like, when you're kind of sorting through, okay, I want to do this one, maybe this one's a lower tier, maybe this is a higher priority. How do you make those just like decisions?
Well, being able to choose projects is amazing, because that doesn't always happen. Sometimes you just have to, you take the project that comes to you. But if I'm seeking projects, I'm looking for something that's a good fit for my voice, good fit for my talents, where my accent ranges are, and my background, of course, and do our timelines meld? Because sometimes the authors need something right now. Maybe it's a Christmas story and they want it to be published, released before Christmas or the holidays or something like that. And that maybe it's not going to work for me. Or maybe it's something with the main character is a completely different background than me. And I'm like, you need someone that can really connect to this material better than I can. And so those are the projects that I would pass up, projects that I would seek out. And like I said, anything with a historical bent, fiction or nonfiction, is like, I really enjoy that. But I love fantasies, romances, and women's literature as well. Something that gives me something to sink my teeth into.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think as far as audiobooks, I've always leaned into, or I think I actually kind of introduced myself to audiobooks when it came to, when I was in college, actually. I took a 19th century British literature class, and those
Nice.
books were extremely long.
Yeah.
And I was already a poli-sci major. And when I broke it down, it was like I needed to read somewhere around 300 to 400 pages a day to like actually make this sustainable.
Wow.
And I was like, that's not going to work. I have to breathe and eat at some point. And so I actually like launched into finding audiobooks for content for that particular class, because it was more story based than a lot of my other kind of classes, which were more analytical. And I think the most striking thing to me was, because I was taking a 19th century British literature class, I really searched for audiobook narrators who were British, because it felt like, right, yeah, it felt like that would connect with the character and give me what felt like a truer experience. And I think when people are seeking out, I don't think that it's changed, right? When you talk about how you kind of find your material and connect to it, I think people do seek out voices that in some way resonate with them, because there's nothing like turning on an audiobook and you're like, okay, this is nothing like I've imagined it.
You have that little sample first, because different people like different voices, like you said, and there are different. Some people just read the book, and that's all that the listener wants. Other people really act the characters. So it finding the style and the narrators that you like.
No,
Yeah.
no, I completely agree. And I think one of the things I think that I would love to hear your opinion on is, I think audiobooks are a completely separate experience, in the sense that I think you can definitely read the book and then go and listen to the audiobook and get a different kind of experience with it. So like, I'd give the example of like Neil Gaiman's one of my favorite authors. And he reads his stories on audiobook a lot of the time himself. But I will read the book by itself and then go and listen to the audiobook, because it's a different experience. How, as a narrator, when you're in that zone, right, and you're trying to create an interpretation, or create an experience with your words when you're reading it, what kind of, I guess, thoughts or themes are you kind of sinking your teeth into, whether it be throughout projects or like a mantra maybe you come back to?
Yeah, I'm really character driven. Obviously not in non-fiction, but in fiction work, I really try and look at things from the perspectives of the characters. So every character is a real person in my head. Even the walk-on characters, even the the bit pieces, they're all part of the story. A coach once said to me that that walk-on character doesn't know that they're not the main character in the story. They don't know. To them, they're the main character. That's their cameo. That's it. They. So I kind of look at it a little like that. I do love to really look at the overall story arc and see what the author's saying. What does the author want to portray through this story? And that's my job, right? Just to portray the author's intent. And the author's saying something, and every author has their own voice within the story. And so seeing what that is and just sinking into that. I always pre-read the books, of course, and I'm looking at different aspects of the characters and the whole, I want to say vibe, the whole, whole story. Yeah.
I love that. So I guess on a more practical note, taking a slight deviation from maybe content, how are you as an audiobook narrator, voice actor, always honing your craft? Like, what would you say you do weekly, monthly, whatever, to try and keep yourself always growing? I don't think it's a profession we think much about, how like the practice of it. But how would you say like that actually looks on the ground level?
Yeah, it's definitely something you have to keep practicing. It's kind of like being an athlete, I guess. If you don't do it, you're just going to like fall out. So you be mindful of it as on a daily basis. When I'm out and about, I'm looking at people and I'm listening to their voices and I'm seeing how they react to other people. Just something simple like that. But I coach regularly. I've had some wonderful acting coaches, and that really does make a difference with leveling up your game. Even on a particular book, perhaps maybe I'm not quite feeling it. I'm like, I can't get into this very well. Maybe if I'm having trouble, I'll connect with a coach on that and just work with them, say on the first chapter, and they bring different perspectives that I might not have thought of. Like, oh yeah, that's right. And then that's it. And then I'm off. But even just on a general level, I take regular coaching classes and I connect with other audiobook narrators and get feedback with them as well. And yeah, and it's a great community. It's so supportive. And I count my lucky stars that I'm in this world with these wonderful people, because it's just, they're amazing to work with.
I love that. So tell me how you build community as like if say I'm a new I'm trying to get in the game, right? This is new to me. I would love to be a voice actor. That's not my future, but say that is the case, and I'm looking to like start to seek out these types of communities to kind of connect with like-minded people. How, if you were starting all over again today, how would you go about it?
Yeah, there are so many online groups you can connect with, lots of Facebook groups, and then start filling out coaches, asking other people, who have you coached with, who have you, and then coaches are also going to connect you with other groups. There's always going to be people around you that you didn't know were there. When I lived in Virginia, I thought, I don't know anybody who's doing this, and I was completely new. And so I actually started a meetup group with other voiceover actors. And most of us ended up being narrators, but there were other specialities in there too, video game actors and anime actors. And, it was amazing. And a really vibrant group of people that I was able to connect with. But most of my connection is online. And then also in places like I go to a couple of times. I've been to the New England narrator retreats where we just get together and we have some coaches and we have some publishers there, and we're we're just like sitting around the campfire and with people who know where you're at and with people who are supporting you. There's the Audiobook Publishers Association. You can connect with people there. If you want to know more about the narrator's role of things, then one of my fellow narrators, Karen Cummings, has a wonderful website, the Narrator's Roadmap, and that is just full of all the information you would ever want to know. If you have questions after that, then that's going to point you in the place to go to answer those questions, to connect with more people. So it's, like I said, it's the most supportive community I've ever been in. I love it.
Community and collaboration, I think, is a big point that we love to touch on here on the Inkwell Exchange. I think probably my next question is very connected to that collaboration point, which is, how would you say you collaborate with authors, and then what would you say is like kind of maybe unique about your process of collaborating with authors?
Okay, well, definitely it is a collaboration because you're creating something together. Once I've connected with the author and we've decided everything's going to work out and they've hired me, then I send them like a whole welcome packet, letting them know what my process is, so they know exactly what to expect at each step of the way. They know what I'm going to be doing, and they know, what's going on with their work. I'll send them a sample, about 15 minutes or so from their book, highlighting the main character voices or a pivotal scene, maybe anything that is going to help them know what I'm going to be doing with it. I'll also ask them background of the main characters that they have, anything that might not be explicit in the book, because usually I can get a grasp of everything I need by reading the book. But sometimes it's good to know, if I'm reading through the book, it's good to know if they mention somebody's accent like 3/4 of the way through the book. It's nice to know that when I'm reading it at the beginning, just so I get their voices in my head as I go along. I get to know these characters. And so if there's something that I need to know about the characters that's not mentioned until the end, it's nice to know that at the beginning. If they're part of a series, it's really nice to know if a small character in the first book is going to be the main character in the third book. So I don't maybe give them a voice that I'm not going to want to have a leading character play, something that might be hard in my voice, or maybe a strange accent or something. I don't know. Things like that. So it's definitely, we connect a lot before the main recording even begins. Yeah.
So then the other thing I'm always curious about, do voice actors collaborate with each other as well? So like, say for instance, you've talked with an author, they've got a range of voices that they want to be able to hear, that executing with one voice actor isn't possible. Is that something that you also do, or is it up to the author in the scenario to just hire different people for different parts and edit it together? How does that kind of pull together and work?
Yeah, well, unless the author is also an editor and a sound engineer, I wouldn't recommend that. But there are places that do that. I've definitely collaborated. I've worked on quite a few multicast projects. There are companies that specialize in multicast projects where you have a different voice for each character. There's also dual narration, where perhaps you're having two different point of views in your book, maybe a male and a female point of view, and so you want a male and a female narrator. And definitely I can help point the author in the right direction for either finding that other narrator or a publishing company, distribution company that's going to help pull everything together and make it all sound seamless, even though we're all recording in different places.
So is there anything, so I'm hoping that I gave the authors really like a little crash course in audiobook narrating 101 with that series of questions, but is there anything else that you wish as an audiobook narrator that authors knew when they come to you with a project? Is there anything that you're like, oh, this would be super helpful just for an author to know walking in the door?
Well, once they've come to me or they've chosen their narrator, I want them to know, we love your baby. It's okay. We're going to take really good care of it because we're investing ourselves into your work. And so just trust us, you know, it's okay. And also, it might sound different to what you imagined it in your head because, you know, we can't hear what's in your head. So it's okay if it sounds different because, you know, when people read your book, they're not hearing what's in your head either. They're like reading it in their heads. So everybody's got their own, it's kind of like looking at a rainbow, right? Everybody sees a slightly different rainbow. And I feel like that when people read books, everybody's reading a slightly different book because they're all bringing their own perspectives to it. So I think that's a good thing to bear in mind. Also, sometimes if you're writing, still in the writing phase, write with the audio in mind because it can be tricky to keep that momentum going. Say if there's a really fast-moving dialogue and you've got he said, she said, he said, she said on the page, people just skim through it. But when you're listening or when you're reading it out loud, we're articulating every he said, she said, you know, and that can kind of, that it's hard to keep that rhythm going. Although, you know, it's definitely possible, of course, but that's something to bear in mind.
That's actually, I think the last point is particularly amazing because we have a lot of authors and writers on and in our audience, and we talk a lot about dialogue because I am convinced it is one of the most difficult things to write, particularly for the reason that you just said, is you want to keep the identity of the person speaking clear, but without exhausting your audience, because some of those he said, she said, the audience, like the reader itself, is actually skipping as well. And so I think that's an excellent point for some of our authors that may be in the process of writing.
Yeah, just try reading out loud. Try reading your own work out loud. See what it sounds like.
Yeah. I think that's a really great point. That's a part of the editing process that I think a lot of us skip, even if it's just like emails. It's fine. It sounds good enough. But I think the other thing you mentioned that was super interesting to me was you talked about when you're going through the book and you're reading it with the pacing. I think we think a lot about in story structure kind of the pacing of the book overall, like making sure there's action and romance in a good spot, but actually pacing your pages, like big chunks of description versus the itty bitty like dialogue sound. Are there any, I guess, as an audiobook narrator, when you're looking through and kind of previewing your book, I'm always concerned about those like huge chunks of kind of narration that aren't connected to a character that may sit in the middle of a plot. How do you kind of deal with making those still flow and kind of keeping your listener from checking out? Because that's where I'm really good at falling off the.
Yeah, well, first of all, the narrator can't check out and just read, because if the narrator's checked out, the listener's checked out. But if you're reading that and acting that as if you're in the moment and discovering it for the first time, then that draws the listener in, and they're like, oh, "What's going on?" You know. So that's a really good
point. That's a really good point. Okay, my last content-related question is: how do you deal with projects, if you have done one, where there may be a plot twist or or like, as you mentioned, something about the character that comes out kind of later on? I know writers try and lay some of that groundwork when they're writing, but how do you make sure you're not maybe emphasizing a point too much or not enough or whatever when you kind of already know from your pre-read what the plot twist or whatever is?
Yeah, it is important to know who done it, right, at the end. But again, it's just knowing you cannot emphasize a certain point. You can't like direct like the listener to be like, okay, this is an important point. You must listen to this. Now, maybe in nonfiction, you do that, highlight the emphasis of the paragraph or whatever, or the chapter. But in fiction, you can't do that. Again, you put yourself in the moment. It's almost like it's happening in the immediate moment, happening right now. And so you're discovering it and taking time to discover from the narrator's point of view, whoever the narrator in the book is, whether it's first person or third person or whatever. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, I want to know how we at the Inkwell can follow your work, can support your work, can go find your work. How can we be very great Lillian Rachel audio book listeners? How can we, find you? Please tell us.
Okay. Well, my website, lillianrachel.com, has all the information on it, I believe. And I narrate under the name Lillian Rachel. So if you search for me wherever you get your audiobooks, I believe all of my books are on Audible, but there are also on other platforms as well. So depending on where the author or the publisher wanted to distribute them.
I love that. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on the Inkwell Exchange. I've loved talking to you. It's been lovely. And I want to thank you for taking the time.
Yep. Well, thank you so much for the invitation. This has been so fun, and I so love what you do, supporting the authors. And I'm a big author fan because I don't write. That's not my genre of expertise. So, like, being able to take these crafted worlds and bring them to life is an amazing thing to be able to do. Thank you.
Of course, of course, of course. Well, I want to thank all of you all for tuning in and listening, and I hope you enjoyed the interview. Go follow Lillian, go see her, see all her page, and see where you can find her audiobooks. I know that's my next stop because I've got a long drive ahead of me today. So I hope you all have a great rest of your Saturday, and we will check you in with you, I think, the next week or so. Keep an eye out for the next Inkwell Exchange. Bye, all.